Today we have special guest Steve Eelkema, a Christian art teacher at a public school in Southern California. Today Steve's going to talk about how he, as a Christian man, is able to glorify God in his workplace and how he's able to represent Christ in his secular work environment. So Steve, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a bit about your education and background in the church, as well as just where you're coming from as a Christian man working at a public school.
Okay, I'm Steve Eelkema. I guess I can go back as far as I am a graduate of Northwestern College, which is a Reformed Church college in Iowa. I graduated there with my BA in art education. Upon moving to California, I had to receive my B-CLAD certification, endorsed to teach K through 12 art. So that's educational stuff. I've been teaching, I think this might be my 25th, 26th, 27th, I don't know, they kind of run together. All in public school. You're right, I'm a Christian guy teaching in a public school. I've grown up in the church. I've served as a church deacon and a church elder a couple of times. I've also served as a church, I won't say youth pastor, but a youth leader, sometimes being in a supportive role, sometimes being in a lead role. So a lot of my life has been centered around youth and obviously Christ.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. So why don't you describe your current working environment at your school and just how you're able to represent Christ in your workplace and also how that connects to your time in youth ministry.
Okay. I have taught both high school and middle school, but my current setting is at Summit High School, which is a alternative educational or some people call it a continuation setting. It's for high school kids, mostly juniors and seniors, who have failed their freshman and sophomore years and have come to us to earn or get back those credits that they've lost out on. Hopefully to graduate on time. Sometimes they earn enough credit that they can return to their home schools. So that's I'm the only one there who obviously can teach art, but also students in the state of California have to have a required 70 elective credits, and I'm one of two people there that can do elective credits. So I have a lot of kids come through taking art, not only for state standard art stuff, but for elective credits as well. My time in youth ministry, I probably did that early on while I was still in college. So I have a lot of experience working with kids, mostly teenagers and up. And so hanging out with kids is probably the one thing that has prepared me most for teaching and really my current setting. You have to remember that these kids have been in traditional school all their life and have really kind of failed at it. And so a traditional classroom setting in a traditional school doesn't work. And so our current to staff ratio is about 18-1. Mine, with the blessing of the Lord, happens to be a little smaller than that. But it allows me to be very one-on-one with my kids, get to know my kids, and a lot of the things I learned in youth ministry as far as just being able to sit down and talk with a kid, talk about life, talk about situations that they're going through, talking about, how'd they even end up at our school, how those failures don't define who they are. We all make mistakes, but our mistake doesn't have to define us, that we can learn from those. Youth ministry really helped me in preparing for not only becoming a teacher, but I really think becoming a teacher in the current role that I'm in. And also being a Christian, sharing the love of Christ with others. You really approach these kids with a loving and caring nature, because a lot of them do. When you sit down and you talk with them, everybody has a story, and some of them have been through a lot of them have been through a lot of rough stuff that kids really shouldn't have to deal with. And so when they know that somebody cares about them, when they know that somebody takes the time to get to know them, but listen to their story and try to be empathetic, doesn't mean that I, have to take it easy on them, but maybe I approach them differently than I would somebody else, even within the same classroom, because I understand where they're coming from. Maybe I realize that they have more hardships at home, and so there's more leniency there of getting work done on time, maybe without penalty, because I also know that they're working a job or something like that, because they're taking care of siblings because their parents aren't around, that kind of thing. Again, I think it's made me more compassionate towards my students.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like, as you're one of the only people who can do electives in your school, it seems like probably most of the kids end up going through your classroom. Is that right?
Yeah. Depending on where the kids are at when they come in, some kids have already passed their art classes and maybe have done okay in elective courses, and they really need to hammer down on core classes like math and English. Some kids have been put in math and English so many times that they're just behind on electives. So it is kind of hit and miss, but I do get to see most of the kids in our school at least some point in their time at Summit.
Definitely, yeah. So as a Christian man working in a public school, what are some challenges that you've faced with representing Christ in the workplace? Because obviously you can't explicitly talk about that in your workplace. So what are some of those challenges?
That's probably the biggest one. Is I can't talk about Christianity unless they bring that up. But being an art teacher, there are ways. I have ways of making them talk. A lot of art history is based around Christian artifacts, Christian paintings, Christian stained glass windows, things like that. And so, for example, like when I introduce 1-point perspective to students, one of the best paintings for that is the Last Supper. And so we can spend a little time talking about how all the lines in that painting that show depth go back to a single point, which is 1-point perspective. But when I intro that painting, obviously I need to talk about who painted it, what's the subject matter, what's going on in the picture. And it's amazing to me how many of my students who have never studied art know exactly what's going on in that picture. And for students who have had me before, or students who, and this probably leads into what separates me from a non-Christian teacher or whatever, just the way I live my life, the way I carry myself in my classroom. You can imagine we have some colorful and salty people at our school, both students and teachers. But I carry the rule in my class that you're not allowed to cuss. And I realize that for a lot of those kids it slips out, but I make them aware really within the first couple of days of being in my class, like, hey, you can't say that. Hey, call you on that. Hey. And they realize that I live my life to a different, the beat of my own drum. There's something different about Mr. Eelkema, that kind of thing. And when all of a sudden you have that aspect, and then Mr. Eelkema is talking about the Last Supper or something like that, and he knows a lot of the story behind that, all of a sudden there's this connection. And undoubtedly, that's when I get the questions of, Mr. Eelkema, are you a Christian? And I'm like, yeah, I am. Or they'll ask if I'm religious. And I'll say, well, yeah. I mean, I don't like to say that I'm religious. I like to say that I'm a Christian. And then that opens up a whole dialogue that I think that they're, in some aspects, dying to have. But they're waiting for the right person. They're waiting for a safe, non-threatening place. And they know that they can have that dialogue within my room. Of course, I always have somebody who, chimes in that, well, I'm an atheist and I don't believe in that stuff. And I guess the sarcastic nature of myself is, well, the first thing I'll ask them is, you don't believe in that stuff, like the Bible? And they're like, yeah, I don't believe in the Bible. And I'll ask them, well, have you ever read the Bible? Well, no, I haven't. Well, then you're not an atheist. You're just a lazy atheist. Because how do you believe in something that you've never read? And that's a good one, Mr. Eelkema. That's a good one. And I'm like, no, that's a legit point. It's like me saying that I hate hamburgers, but I've never had one. And I, I'm not going to hold it against you if you're an atheist, but know what you believe or don't believe, and know why you believe in it or don't believe in it. Stand for what you mean, what you say. So it just, again, going back to the art history side of it, it opens up a lot of areas for dialogue and things like that. So you can, I don't want to say you can trick kids into it, but I have my ways.
Yeah, and that's really creative. I mean, so much of Western history, at least, has been shaped by Christianity, even from a secular point of view. So
Sure.
Really, any teacher who's teaching math or science or anything like that, there's been so many great Christian thinkers in Western history that you can present that. That's very creative.
Right.
And on that, what are some lessons that the Lord has taught you just through teaching at a public school? And those are personal lessons or lessons about showing Christ to other people?
I think over the years, I've been transformed in. I think when you first start in teaching, you're all about your curriculum, your classroom management, that kind of thing, and rightly so. But I've learned over the years that kids, and we say this all the time in teaching and coaching, that kids don't care how much they know until they know how much you care. And when I take the time to get to know my students, when I get to put my guard down a little bit, I know that some teachers are very guarded. They realize that the Mr. Eelkema who is in their classroom is the same Mr. Eelkema who they're going to run into on the streets. He's the same guy who's coaching a football game on a Friday night. They have a hard time believing that, he doesn't cuss here, but maybe he does, in the heat of the moment of a football game or when he's at home or what. And I'm like, no, I'm the same person. When they see the authenticity in that, and I think that for me too, I just learned to be authentic throughout my life. There's no facade. There's nothing I need to put up. I don't get offended by their questions. Sometimes people get offended when you ask about their home life or their wife or their kids or whatever. And I see the relevance in kids wanting to know that. And so many kids nowadays grow up in such horrible situations and horrible families. How are they supposed to know what that looks like if you're not willing to tell them? So I've learned to be authentic. I've learned to be open. I've learned to be, just, I don't know, caring. And I've also learned that lessons that I've learned in life, people will say, well, you went through that trial, that tribulation or whatever, because it's, you're going to see it pay off later on down the road or what. And there's a lot of truth to that. I think of right after my freshman year in college, my mom had a brain aneurysm that like wiped her out. And she was the one parent I was super close to. I wasn't really super close to my dad. And that, in the moment, I could see where that situation brought my dad and I close together. But 20 years later, I can see where that situation, God allowed me to grow from that and being able to relate to my students. The trials and tribulations that went along with that, along with her rehabilitation, the money that my parents had set aside for me for college went to all of her rehab. So then it forced me to work my way through college. And so I can relate to my students who have to work and do school at the same time. And think, man, this is a hard situation. Hey, I know, I've been there, I've done that. I can relate to students who have lost a parent, albeit for me, later on in life, but it doesn't make that loss any easier. I've dealt with, kind of catastrophic sickness. And the rehabilitation road and that kind of thing. And so again, I can relate on a lot of different levels to those kids. And sometimes being okay with just saying, I don't have the answers, but I know that through patience and through prayer and through just faith, sometimes it's okay to not have all the answers, that you just trust that this is going to work out. And it's going to work out for the better. That sometimes that's just the encouragement that they need. And then there are times that you don't think that you've made any difference at all. You've taught them a little bit about art and they've made some cool stuff in your class and they're out the door. And then, I don't know, through modern technology, they're able to get a hold of you via email or Instagram or something like that, and a kid that you never thought that you'd ever hear from again sends you a message from out of the blue and says, "Man, you really made an impact in my life. There was one instance where you said this or you did that just really had a profound impact on my life." And I'm sitting there thinking, I did? Like, I don't even remember doing that. So you never know. You never know how God's going to use you. You never know what's gonna come out of your mouth. That I like to say is guided by the Holy Spirit. That's my prayer every morning when I walk in. Is, okay, Lord, use me, fill me full of the Holy Spirit. Just let Him talk. And that way with colleagues too. I think the authenticity is not, sometimes we're this way with kids and this way with colleagues because they're older. Who I am is who I am. And hopefully the love of Christ is what pours out of me and is what people see. I know that kids and the people I work with have been jaded by those Christians who are on their soapbox saying, "Hey, repent, I'm a Christian, look at me." And then a month later, you're looking at them thinking, that's not very Christian-like. I'll be the first to tell them that, I'm not perfect. I don't know if there's a day that goes by that I'm not praying for forgiveness for things that I've said, things that I've done, things that I've thought, opportunities missed. But again, I think that just speaks back to the authenticity of it.
Yeah, definitely. So if you had to go back, start it all over 25 years ago as a teacher, what would you want to do differently? What advice would you give to someone starting out, and what resources do you have now that you wish you could have gone back and had in the beginning?
Looking back on it all, I don't know that I would do anything differently, because I have the advantage of looking back over 25 years and seeing God's hand work through it all. So it would be hard for me to say, "Oh, I would really change this," or "I would really change that." I I can say that, like, teaching middle school was not my favorite because they're middle schoolers. But in those tough times, in dealing with kids, I had really good colleagues and a really good support group, and that challenged me as a teacher and grew me as a teacher. So looking back on 25 years, I don't know what I would change. As far as advice going forward, and I guess I would approach it like as a Christian in a public school. The hardest thing, I think, is being true to yourself. Being a Christian in a public school is not, you're going to be, it's sad to say, one of the few. You're going to have a lot of people who do not agree with you on certain subjects that Christians believe in. You're going to face a lot of ridicule because of things that you believe in. And I would just say, make sure that you've got a good support network of friends, of family. You don't have to have a lot of people, but you have to have really good ones that are there for you. And then don't go too long without recharging your batteries. Don't think that you can do it on your own. I guess maybe a part of that friend group or whatever is make sure you've got a solid church home. Make sure that you've got a pastor who's really pouring into you. And it doesn't have to be on a one-to-one basis, but I know that our pastor just, speaks the truth, preaches the Bible. And that's what I need to hear to charge my batteries every week. Challenges me as a Christian to dig deeper, and then doing that, making sure that your relationship with Christ is solid. Spending time in His Word, spending time in prayer. I spend a lot of time in prayer because you're going to need that as you stand firm for what you believe in. And then again, don't feel like some people are soapbox people. They can stand on their soapbox and just preach it out. And there's spots in the world for those type of people. That's not me. I'm just I don't know, the silent assassin for Christ. I don't have to beat my chest and that kind of thing. I just live it out. You can be an effective Christian and an effective Christian in a public school just by showing the love of Christ. Doesn't mean that you have to preach it. Just love on people. And there's a lot of people out there nowadays that speaks volumes. A lot of people out there who are broken, who need to be loved.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you so much. Appreciate you doing this interview with me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you.
You got it. Good.